Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our retrospective on films that showed us the horror inherent in replacing love with technology with the 1987 film, The Stepford Children. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, and that's, you're an unusual person if you have, but if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, because we've all seen it because we have the YouTube warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, creator of the Alex Van Helsing novels. With us tonight from Los Angeles, Mr. Adam Foshko, screenwriter for the new Skylanders Superchargers, story consultant for Destiny the Taken King, writer and creative producer for Call of Duty, Advanced Warfare, Exo Zombies. Say hello, Adam.
I feel like it's 1987 all over again, and hello.
Hello. Oh, I enjoyed going back to 1987 with this. And the woman that I met in 1987, who changed my life forever, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from the lovely attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Did this take you back, all the way back to 1987?
It did.
Party, 1987.
Yes.
But
yes.
You know what? I have to say that as much as this was a horror story, the clothes were not the horror that they really were in 1987. I felt like that maybe it's because most of the people are wearing Little House on the Prairie frock, but I just thought that maybe somehow they escaped like the worst part of 80s fashion in this movie.
I don't know. I mean, I kind of, it's part of the fact that nobody was wearing like black and white checkered shirts. It wasn't like, it just seemed, it was beyond horrible. It was sort of criminal. The hairstyles and the clothes.
No, absolutely. I didn't mean to interrupt you, brother. I'm really sorry. So I recognize a lot of the fashions here, a lot of them. These giant belts that the girls wear, because girls wore two kinds of belts in my memory from that period. You had little skinny belts that would that were kind of new wavy, and sort of
right.
The sister who's kind of a rocker, she wears like a little skinny.
It was like her, a little thin belt.
Right, and then the cheerleader girl, she's wearing this thing that is held together by a big belt with a giant buckle in the center.
Yeah, I remember the big belts, and you wore them low down on your hips.
Right. And the guy at one point, the boy is wearing, and clothes, by the way, are one of the things that earn the ire from the parents in this movie. The boy is wearing like a pink or chartreuse
the
t-shirt
boy did have some bad clothes.
with like an overshirt that's open, and then for some strange reason, he's taken what appears to be a strip of wool and like wrapped it around his head.
We both saw him and thought of Corey Haim at the same time.
Completely. That's exactly what that was like. It was like Corey Haim, but it should have been red because he was doing Rambo.
Is that what that's about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, unless it was, you have to go back to a Loverboy video other than that, and that's all we have to go on.
The thing is, if you think about it, headbands are a big deal around this period, because you're right. Rambo does the thing.
Karate Kid.
The Karate Kid. And so then they take off because there's Olivia Newton-John as headbands, right? And everybody sort of imagines in any sort of futuristic thing that people are going to have headbands like crazy. So you see all these designs with like golden headbands and like.
It was a thing, but the kid in the boat, I think by far had the sort of was the, in the way that Lost Boys actually sort of made it look good with Corey Haim.
Yeah.
This guy just sort of made it. This guy made it look horrible, and I was actually delighted when he was taken, because I was just like, oh, good, great, another Chess King victim now is taken away.
Yeah. No, that kid. We open with a dad. This is, by the way, is a sequel to the Stepford Wives. I won't even bother reading the synopsis because we will post where to go see this film if you haven't seen it. But the Stepford Children is on YouTube in its entirety.
And it's about the only place it is.
Yeah. Yes, because although released theatrically overseas, so if we make a promise that we only watch theatrically released films, this one was released theatrically, and I can only imagine. Can you imagine, Adam? Going
it's
to
still
the
playing
theater
in Guam.
I mean, think about. Well, I mean, imagine like you're in Italy, you're in Rome, and you're going to skip going to see, the Colosseum because you got a date, and you're going to go to the theater and watch Barbara Eden in The Stepford Children.
Somehow I did manage to see this movie, though, even if it wasn't in the theater.
Yeah.
I saw it at some point, because I remember.
Listen, Richard Anderson is still big in Europe. Oscar Goldman. They'll go, Oscar Goldman.
Okay, I was going to ask about
show
that.
Up. Yeah, and James Coco. I mean, they'll draw a crowd, in Europe somewhere. It may be in Smolensk, maybe in Eastern Europe, but I think it's still playing somewhere.
I'm sure that people really adore James Coco in some portion of the world.
What's not to adore?
We open up with
okay.
this obnoxious kid going out in a boat, and he's dressed like Corey Haim. He's got the big flowy shirts, and he's being a smartass, and his dad is like, I'm so disappointed in you. It shows in every time I row this boat out to go fishing. And then that is Oscar Goldman, right? Who shows up with a bunch of menfolk? Yes. What's his name again?
It's Richard Anderson. This is a made-for-TV movie, and part of the deal for the made-for-TV movie is you have to have at least one or ideally two stars to get the thing made. That's certainly what it was like, then when these were really, really popular. So they got Barbara Eden, they got Richard Anderson, they had some cameos. I think you mentioned Dick Butkus. I think that's right.
Yep.
I think that was particularly at that time, and James Coco. And I think that's I think these were just guys who helped to sort of weigh it down. And that's kind of how I think partly how it got made, apart from the fact that they said, look, Stepford Wives is an amazing movie. People will flock to see this in their homes. And they came up with this story, which was cobbled together as nearly as sort of I can tell, like a rickety bridge and sort of thinly covered with a veneer of a narrative. I'll let you continue with your description of the movie.
I didn't even get your opening thought. I should even ask, is that your opening thought, or do you have any other opening thoughts about the Stepford Children as we kick this off?
Listen, I think it has to do with the fact that Stepford Wives, love it or hate it, I think came from a particular perspective, and I think was maybe not considered incredibly important at the time, but I think it actually was an important movie. And it actually had moments of horror that I think were really, really good. And I think the problem with doing a movie of the week is you typically have different standards and practices that you have to adhere to. So the story was never going to really dip down into true horror because that's didn't really have a whole lot of budget per se, but also that was not really where that audience was going to go. It was more like the scent of horror, like the promise of something strange. And it was really that so therefore it was extremely superficial. And that was a giant problem. They stripped out 99% of the horror that really what was sort of made Stepford Wives really terrific. They largely shot it on one lens as far as I can tell. And it really barely made sense in a lot of ways.
When you say shot it on one lens, what do you mean about that?
Well, ideally, when you're shooting a picture, it has a style, and you use as many different kind of lenses as will support that style. You could go with a long lens, or you go with a short lens. I mean, the way you compose things, is definitely like. It's done. A theatrical film is typically shot different than a movie of the week. We see it a lot, with films with shows that are made very, very much more quickly. They may be shot on film, but they're made very, very quickly, and so they really tend to use one, regular lens, and they compose all their shots. You don't see a lot of telephoto. You don't see a lot of, short lens. You really just see this regular sort of prime lens, this medium lens, this, very standard lens that everything's sort of composed, not even a telephoto. And so the problem with that is everything sort of has this look to it that is very blah. It's very normal. It's covered perfectly fine. It's got singles and over shoulders, and it's got two shots, and it's got established shots, but it's all sort of done in a way which is extremely workmanlike because that's exactly what it is. It's a made-for-TV movie. You can almost always spot the difference Thankfully now we have, because we have Netflix movies and things like that. You look at Jessica Jones, for example, and everything is composed there in a completely different way, it has a style, and their composition is meant to support that particular style. You can tell with the shots that they choose, their shots of choice, tell with the lenses that they use. Now it's very much, it gives you a greater sense of production value. It also gives the show a certain amount of attitude and a position, and this doesn't.
Well, I mean, the difference between like the way a prestige miniseries like Jessica Jones is shot compared with this, and I agree with you, because even if you look at prestige miniseries of the time, like Shogun and stuff, you still have exactly
Shogun
the same kinds of setups,
or Rich Man, Poor Man, or something like that. But the lenses. But I would argue that the lenses very often were different. The prestige, first of all, the budget was probably more, and then you have more star talent. All like if it was Rich Man, Poor Man at the time, which was huge, or name some other really really great.
Well, I think of like the Winds of War and
Winds of War, even Roots. I mean, this was all sort of done. I think they had a larger budget, and they tended to use different lenses. Sometimes you would have a wider shot that you were using a different kind of lens for, and there was stuff that you could tell that there were production values that were usually they're inherent in the way that it was shot. Definitely with something like Shogun, there's no way you could have shot that with just like a single straight normal lens. You really had to do that, but it had a budget, and it was meant to be a giant thing, and it was. But this
have to do this a lot. Does this have to go a lot faster, basically?
You really have to go. Yeah, right. You have to go a whole lot faster. Usually these are very aggressive schedules, or they were once upon a time. And this was, I think they could have gotten by probably with, shooting it this way, and it was perfectly fine. But I think that's just indicative to the kind of story that it was, because if you look at the story and how it kind of holds up, it feels like it's largely rushed. So it's got the hint and sort of a promise of kind of what made it good, but it doesn't really kind of deliver. Like episode 1. It doesn't really sort of deliver in the way that you would want something like the Stepford Wives to have delivered on. I suspect that it improved later, but this is all the trappings of an 80s movie of the week picture. Like, kids might watch it. Parents are like, oh, we hate our kids because they're listening to that new wave crap, and all that sort of stuff and the fashions. And so it's really meant for people who are sitting at home on a Tuesday night, probably not really with their families, but maybe, and largely just sitting at home watching TV. And it's probably fine for that.
I have to say though, our 10-year-old, and our 14-year-old watched it and was just transfixed by it.
Well, the 10-year-old is pretty upset by it. She actually was like really nervous, but she said she liked it afterwards. So I was like, I don't know.
Is that because of the overall plot, which is that the kids, which this is not giving anything away, the kids are largely sort of taken away?
Yeah, she hated the idea that parents, and so do I, hate the idea that parents would, not want to, not only not want to protect their kids, but actually participate
would literally
in killing them.
Murder them in order to have kids who said yes sir and no sir. That's really remarkable. Oh, well, okay, Julia.
You go ahead.
What are your opening thoughts on the Stepford Children?
So I remembered watching this movie because I guess probably I was at the age to watch a movie of the week type of thing. Well, I mean, I would have been in high school, so maybe not. I don't know. Somehow I watched it. And
so we met the year this movie came out.
Yeah, no, I'm saying. So I guess probably not then, because that would have been more, I don't know, somehow I watched it anyway. But I remember it, I don't remember that much about it, but that I'm a very lucky girl thing where the robot is glitching out. That has stayed burned into my brain, and it comes back to me every time somebody says I'm a lucky girl or I'm a lucky person.
Really?
Whatever. In my head, I go, I'm a very lucky girl, very lucky girl, very lucky girl. It's like just like a Pavlov's dog thing. I'm just triggered by it. So that was interesting to me to see that again. I think that it is more horror than the first one even was to me because of the the fact that these people are murdering their children. I mean, that's just so that's even more horrific than murdering your wife, because murdering your wife is that's a pretty common meme in fiction, you know.
It is a common meme.
I mean, like there's this hilarious Saturday Night Live thing back when
Daryl Hammond.
Yeah, he used to do Bill Clinton, and he was like talking about how all his favorite movies were the movies where people's presidents' wives died, or people tried to kill their wives or whatever. It was really funny. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, to me it is pretty terrifying. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Adam, about, you know, the kind of the quality and how it's just sort of, you know, it is what it is. But I mean, and certainly watching it on YouTube, the quality's awful because we just can't get a good picture anyway. But I think it's effective at making you feel terror, you know, for these kids, and just wondering like what the hell's going to happen. You know, I thought the ending was really disappointing because it's just kind of like, boom, it's over. I was like, wait, literally, boom, it's over. So I want to talk about that a little bit later. But you know, for the most part, I think it's fun. It's a fun picture to watch. And like I said, for me, there was a lot of nostalgia, not just because I did see the movie back then, but because yes, we did meet in that year, and I was that age. We're the age of those kids, you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there for us.
Yeah, I actually really, one thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the fashion in this thing. Okay, my opening thoughts, thank you very much, Adam and Julia. My opening thoughts are, watching this movie through a fuzzy VHS transfer on YouTube, broken into 9 parts, just awkwardly sliced up, is probably one of the best ways to enjoy the Stepford Children. I mean, truly, because you know the picture is not very good, which is reminiscent of you know the world back then, and it's you know I mean in a sense, although I would love to get a good version of this film, but there's just something sort of enjoyable about watching it like it's actually Sunday evening in 1987, and your picture is not perfect because for some reason NBC is not coming in very well because there's a storm or something, you know, and it's a true Sunday night movie of the week. But I was fascinated by the story. I really did find myself just constantly thinking about the implications of Stepford as presented in this movie, a true sequel to the 1975 one. And it just kept causing me to come up with all these different questions, like they're replacing, let's assume for a moment that they've solved the problem of making these robots age. They're replacing the wives with robots. They're replacing the children with robots. So basically, the only people who are real in this town are the men. And
who are going to die out eventually.
Yes. Well, but what strikes me is just how bizarre. It's just the weirdest thing that these robot women and robot children who have no real emotion laugh with one another and show pride and do all this stuff that's just programmed in. So they're like, you remember that there used to be these toys called Furbies that would respond to stimuli with light and voice, and they would say things like, hello, how are you, blah. And it was just responding stupidly to whatever stimuli were going on. And if you put 2 Furbies together, they would talk to one another. But they would talk mindlessly just with sounds that would respond. And that's what's actually going on in the town of Stepford when these moms are clapping for their overachieving robot cheerleader children and basketball playing children is they're all just acting according to their programming. The only person who are assuaged by all of this are the husbands. It's the strangest thing in the world. It's very sad, but it made me really interested. Like I kind of felt like this would be a good movie to remake, like really remake.
But you know what I would like to see if it was remade? I get so distracted by what you were saying about like the fact that they're killing off humanity and the age thing. I mean, that they won't age. And who wants to have teenagers, even if they're perfectly behaved teenagers? Who wants to have teenagers forever?
Right.
You know, it's like, I mean, it's just all that so distracting to me. And the murdering and the getting rid of the bodies of who they like, all that stuff. I'm just like, why? I would like to see it remade where they just brainwash the kids, like they just lobotomize them and reprogram them, or somehow, because that to me would be so much more like.
Well, since you mention it, the 1980 film, which we skipped because the only version of that one was an even worse version on YouTube, so we just skipped it entirely.
Which one is this?
Revenge of the Stepford Wives. They're not robots at all. They're using drugs that change their brains.
Right. Well, that's what I would want to see for this, because I think that would be such a strong metaphor for what so many people try to do with, like, when they try to do the reprogramming of the gay kids, or just any kind of thing where you ship your kid off to a therapist or medicate them with Ritalin or whatever it is to try to make them behave the way you want them to behave.
You're going to get so many emails from people.
Well, no, I'm not saying that that's terrible. I'm saying it's a metaphor for, for those kinds of things, the decisions that we make as parents, all of us. I mean, even if you don't decide to medicate your children or send them off to therapists or whatever, we all make decisions constantly to try to get our children to behave the way we feel they should behave. Timeouts. I mean, a lot of people would say, the timeouts is just like shaming and it's making kids. I mean, there's all kinds of things. Spanking, everything that you can do to try to regulate the behavior of a child, in some way, sort of damaging them. I mean, it's kind of like how the way you're building up your muscles is by ripping them apart. And then kind of, I mean, all of that. And so I think that movie to me would be more meaningful as a metaphor of like the things that we do to try to raise our kids to be to straight and narrow, whatever expression you want to use. Because it's just you get so distracted by who would kill their kid, who would just like, I mean, that's just horrific that you can't put yourself in the place, even if you could put yourself in the place of the parent who's irritated by the teenager.
I think sort of it's just a metaphor for the way that we attempt to make our children be something that they're not, or to make their.
But that's what I'm saying is I think the metaphor gets lost in the horror of it, in you going, well, I love my kid too much to ever get rid of them, let alone kill them.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, I think that's true if you think about it some. But I feel like that this movie also split the difference a little bit. I know somewhere they said that they were, killing them, or that he basically, Oscar Goldman just said yes, when they said, "Are you just killing your children?" But it's the whole thing, which we'll get to the end, but just the end where they had all those things that were sort of on the crash carts with the sheets. I'm going, okay, so wait a second. And if you look and you read Wikipedia, it has a different explanation for this. And so again, I just bring up standards and practice again. I'm just like, okay, look, I think what they were sort of doing is, they kind of, I didn't get this from the movie, but as I read the plot even from Wikipedia, because I just followed up with that, it sounded like that they were really trying to sort of have their cake and eat it too, by kind of creating the situation where, you feel like these parents are terrible because, like the dad in the boat with his son where he's being abducted, he kind of rubs his face and kind of looks the other way while Oscar Goldman makes off with him, and the guys from the club, from the dad's club. But at some point, there is some speculation in the plot about, are they really killing them or are they changing them? But these robots are taking their place until they can be ready to be reintroduced. There's a weird.
No.
I know.
They're definitely killing them. It's just that they waited to kill the girl until after they. Because he says that they weren't quite ready with it.
Adam suggests they want to leave it a little bit questionable, so that in theory, if the standards and practices guys come by, the producers can have a plausible excuse and go, "Oh no, you misunderstood."
I just don't see it as even a possibility.
I don't blame you, but you are left with the question, like, who are those people under the sheets?
They're not people. They're those weird creatures that they're building, that they're like growing.
They are. So in this one, they're basically suggesting that they're making something like a cyborg pod people. Yeah. Like with.
It's like the flesh, or what do they call it? What did they call it in Doctor Who? Is it the flesh? Yeah. They're made of this goop or whatever, and so this is the robots, but they have this goop that's kind of been formed over them.
There's cybernetic pod people.
Yeah. There's metal in there too. There's gears. There are joints and so forth that are made of metal, and then there's this outside goopy until it's done, but this sort of like latexy kind of drippy pod person thing, you know. And by the way, that vision at the end of the pod people owes a lot, I think, to the 1978 pod people, for sure. You know,
right? It's really Attack of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah. Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
The ones that Donald Sutherland comes across and like chops up with a shovel. These are a lot like that. The way they sort of jerk around and do all that. But I mean, what I found interesting though was that, and Stepford Wives has been really good to us so far. The last episode, this episode, both of them, because I'm really sort of excited about the fact that I'm constantly, as I'm watching them, being ripped between the actual narrative going on and all the possible things that the narrative means. Like between the practicality of, in an actual story, they're replacing their children with robots and what a strange world that is, versus the meaning of it, and this takes us really back to the beginning of, you know, what causes parents or husbands or wives to be unhappy, that such that they would want to try to remake their family in a different way, and that's necessarily about horror. And think about this. There are all these like spiritual movies out there that I see advertised all the time at the gym, because the gym has DirecTV. DirecTV is constantly advertising various movies they're showing.
Okay.
And there are all these like spiritual movies, and the plot often is wife is unhappy because husband has become a very grumpy and worldly individual, and he's no longer a good person. And you meet like this sort of funny older person who lives in the neighborhood and reintroduces you to various spiritual practices that causes you to bring your family together and transform your husband into something more like what it is that you want to come home.
Yeah, I've seen this movie. Yeah, I feel like I've seen it.
I've seen a bunch of these movies, right? And when you think about it, that's a positive, non-horror way of telling the Stepford Wives. Really, you're kind of saying, my spouse isn't behaving, or my child isn't behaving the way I want them to, and if I can do certain things, I can transform them into a different individual that'll meet my expectations, and then I'll be happy, which is so crazy and self-centered, you know, and sort of egotistical. This notion that you can just mold and twist the person that you live with into being something that reflects well. But those movies don't present it as horror. Stepford Wives movies totally do. We open in, I guess, New York, wherever. It's sort of just like the Stepford Wives, only in this case, the family that's leaving, the kids, the children in this case, are teenagers in high school. And the parents are fed up with these damn kids because they don't like the way that the son is sarcastic. And the funny thing is, there's nothing wrong with him. He's just a dumbass. But the son is like pounding his basketball. He's using a lot of slang. He's like, he's drinking milk out of the carton and using phrases like, "Don't worry, I killed it," meaning I finished the milk carton. And the parents just want to claw his eyes out because they hate how modern this is.
But he is like so just normal and not even remotely bad.
He's just a normal kid. That's exactly right. He's a completely normal.
He's not telling parents to fuck off. He's not,
he's
taking off in the middle of the night with their car. I mean, he's not anything bad.
He's a young Joe Piscopo.
Yeah, exactly. They just don't like the fact that he's too what? Here's your Ritalin question. They don't seem to like that he's so hyper. And they don't. And the sister, meanwhile, has a bunch of like Motley Crue wannabe friends who are all wearing their.
This is all still the father who's largely reacting to this, who comes from Stepford. Yes. And Barbara Eden is just studying for the bar exam. I mean, she's just like, just leave me alone. I'm studying for the bar exam. And she's a little put off by the basketball bouncing and whatnot, but she's much more easygoing than this guy, apparently, who clearly has had some history in Stepford before he came out, because as we discover, he was married once before.
Yes.
But, we don't. Yeah, we suspect that because we've seen the previous one.
Yeah.
But
eventually you find out that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, but Adam, it's a question though. Isn't it strange to think like the way the father kind of expects the son to be, or what's betrayed by the fact that the father is so unhappy about the way his son behaves.
Yep.
You know, think about it. This guy's like, he's got some silver hair. So let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's 50 years old, and it's 1987, right?
Uh-huh.
So this is a boomer. You know, this guy, he went to high school with hippies. You know, well, I don't know, hard to say. But my point is, this is not somebody.
He knew them certainly, but he was probably in his late 20s.
Yeah, I guess so. Yes. Okay, fair enough.
The point is, he shouldn't be a Lawrence Welk, worshiping.
Right. They're and the men's vision of the way that children should behave, the way women should behave. They have this strange, like, they want everybody to dress like the Music Man, like 1912, and the boys and girls, they want everybody to behave sort of like Lawrence Welk. You know? It's
very Lawrence Welky. Yeah, it really is.
Which is so odd, because Lawrence Welk was anachronistic even when it was on. If you think of Lawrence Welk in the 60s, with
people who watched it, people who watched it tended to really pine for the good old days, back when that was Tommy Dorsey, and then back when there were ballrooms and people, sort of like 40s and 50s, and it just seemed like that was a bygone era then, because I think Lawrence Welk started I want to say he started in the 50s, maybe before then, but it certainly wasn't on television until probably the late 50s and 60s. It was one of those things that they
to think of. Welk is around that show, and I don't know how long it goes back, but I've caught plenty of episodes of Lawrence Welk from the late 60s, and it's just so bizarre, to think that like out there in the universe, the new golden age of film is happening, hippies are happening, Woodstock is happening, and Lawrence Welk is happening, and
that demonstrated the true of the 60s. I remember seeing people who were watching Lawrence Welk while it was the 60s, and so all this other stuff was happening. So it really was sharply defining the generation gap, which is something that this movie trades on, but in a 1980s way, which is so anachronistic and strange, because I could see it.
It's
totally
I could see
it from the 70s, more like the 60s. But the 80s, I'm just like, it was such a strange thing to sort of have happen. You could say that there was normal parents, but I got the impression that they were just saying something else. They were trying to actually kind of say more with this. But I don't think they were succeeding. Well,
all it would take, really, really, is one speech by Oscar Goldman. I'm going to keep calling him Richard Anderson.
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy calling him that.
One speech. All you have to do is say, there was one, we could write it in 5 minutes, and it would be all kinds of bullshit that would make sense, at least to him, about how this country was once great, and when...
Well, he kind of says some of that. He does give a speech about how, things are perfect here now.
Yes. Well, no, that's true, but I want to hear what he means by, like, what he wants, because I want to know
why. Yeah, that wasn't the speech.
Why does perfect mean big band music? There's something very specific and fetishistic going on, and it's this notion that I think is captured in a lot of today's politics, and this is like, we're 30 years on from this movie, and we're still haunted by these ideas that if you try hard enough and you elect the right people, that you can recreate an America where people wore ties and said yes sir and listened to Tommy Dorsey.
It's traditionalism that is back when things sort of there's always a time where you can point back and things made sense, know, and it's like this is when things made sense, and to the people in this movie, it seems like small town America. Back when you'd pull into a service station and guys would come out and they would work on your car while you were getting gas, and gas was a nickel or whatever it was.
I will say that did to me make sense as well.
What do you mean?
I mean, that was
having guys come out and service my car.
Right.
Those were good days.
Sense.
But I mean, that's the thing too. I think, Jason, you hit on something, and that is that I think that prevails even today, and it prevails even with sort of the political climate that we're in. And I think maybe this movie tries to sort of touch on that in a particular way. And I think there was some shadowy version of the same sort of idea in A Boy and His Dog, for example. That had that sense of Kansas and kind of what Kansas was pre-Holocaust and kind of what it was, now. It's just an interpretation of another time. But these are men who, have gone to enormous lengths apparently to try and preserve not just their power on this town, but also an ideal in this town, up to and including sacrificing their families, which is absolutely terrible. But it's really hard to see what. And I think the problem with it, and I think that you've both hit on it, and it's really kind of hard to see their end game. You get very sidetracked with it, and you're kind of going, wait, these guys are all going to be dead soon. What are these other people going to do who are now robots? And what does that all mean? And, is it going to be suddenly a town of Amazon women?
Oh, yeah. Is this going to be like Terminator, where now the robots are going to take over the world?
Yeah, and I think the thing is, it's just not made. It is. That's why I say it's also very superficial. Is it's really not made to be thought about too deeply. It really is. These are very broad strokes. These are very broad strokes. Like, the sheriff of the town is a very broad stroke character, and the actor who plays him is great. He fulfills that role. But even Oscar Goldman is playing a very specific kind of role that's broadly defined. And the kids are fairly broad in places. Barbara Eden has more to work with, which is great, but not a whole lot more. And it's just not made to be more than a construct to just hold together long enough to watch 7 episodes of it on YouTube and no more. Whereas we had a you could have a very lengthy discussion about Stepford Wives and kind of what it meant and whatever else, and whether it was intended or not intended, or whether it was fully realized or not. And we're looking at it through the lens of now many years later. This you go, okay, it holds together just long enough to be a dramatic construct where you go, Barbara Eden's in trouble and so are the kids. This is the story. Don't think about it a whole lot, because it begins to really fall apart like a cheap suitcase. And that's, I think, partly because it's movie of the week fare. And I think that, you're right, Julia. I think that if you're a mother and you think about this for any period of time, or you're a parent, and you think about this, human, think about this for any period of time, and you go, oh my God, they're replacing their kids with replicants and probably killing them. That's terrible, and it really is. But you can't really take all that seriously because it just doesn't have enough substance, So I think it's great that it's entertaining, but I don't think it nearly has the meat on its bones to really kind of have a sociological sort of discussion about the chauvinism of the men and what they were doing in the social mores of a time like when Stepford Wives was actually. You don't get to do any of that. In this case, it's just 80s fashions clashing with, Lawrence Welk, and, it's very much sort of told somewhat from the kids' perspective, because part of the movie is about them, realizing that something's going on in the town and sort of, and battling against the mores of the town because they're all robots, but then it hands back over to it being sort of Barbara Eden's story, as she's sort of bringing all this stuff to a close. And when it closes quickly. I mean, that's, once you hit the climax, the door slams shut, and that's it. There's no real denouement. There's no nothing. It's like they're driving out of town, and they're out of there. It's not even like the end of, there was a movie that had a similar sort of thing where, once you understood what was happening, you were out of there. But that was Nomads with Pierce Brosnan, which not everybody has seen. But, you're on these two women were on the road when they figured out what was going on. But that actually had, an actual sort of wind up, and it felt like that played really well, even though they were on the road getting out of there. This was just okay. We got
1986. You're talking about.
quite a movie actually for its time, which is interesting. And it's got Adam Ant in it. It's got Leslie Ann Down, and it was quite a movie. But it's very this shows its movie of the week kind of bones, because it's like, okay, we got 25 feet of film left, and this is the end of the picture, so just go, hit the gas. And they're rolling credits, and that's it. It just holds up long enough for Barbie to do her thing, which is fine.
We should kind of say what that is, what the ending is. Yeah. So let me kind of give a little. So you didn't do the wiki plot summary. So let me kind of do a little back up and we'll do a little plot summary here. So you got the family with the two teenagers, the boy and the girl, and as Adam has said, the dad used to live in Stepford, and he had a wife who died, and we don't know why, but at one point, Barbara Eden is told by one of the Men's Association people that she died of a heart attack, or actually by the principal.
Principal,
the principal says that she died of a heart attack.
Hedgehog.
Then she's told by her husband that she died of cancer, and then she looks in the microfiche at the library and finds that she was killed, that she died suddenly. So whatever that means. So then she decides at this point, because she's gotten suspicious about what's going on in the town, that she's going to go dig her up, and it's kind of gotten a little out of hand there at that point.
That's a great scene.
And she digs up the wife in this bizarrely kind of, I wouldn't say perfectly preserved, but just a weirdly not deteriorated body is in there. And she accidentally drops like the shovel or something in the thing and breaks
the torch. She
drops
the
okay.
torch, yeah.
Okay, it breaks the woman's head. Oh, yeah, right, it's the lamp, because she breaks the woman's head open, and so now there's this eerie glow coming out of this empty shell.
These are the flimsiest robots ever. I just want to tell you that.
No, they break when you knock them over.
Apparently
they do. They're very flimsy.
Oh, they're horrible.
I don't know how they survive. The wives survive all that sex that they have, because it seems like they would break. But anyway, so this one is broken open, and she's her head is clearly not flesh. I mean, it's empty. It's just whatever. I don't know. It's a shell of something. So she knows now that she was a robot or whatever she was. So meanwhile, the son has a girlfriend who is new to town also, and she gets replaced after being afraid that something's about to happen to her, and he tries to help her escape, but she gets run off the road by the Men's Association people, and then they replace her. And so now, so he knows what's going on, and the daughter is clued in that some weird stuff's going on. So they all kind of have three of them. But the husband, of course, is in on the whole thing, so he keeps trying to dismiss their fears, and finally, the teenage daughter, gets replaced. And she is now, she's the one who, when she gets knocked over and gets hurt, she's like, I'm a very lucky girl, very lucky girl, very lucky girl. Yeah. And so she tells the mom that, that David is missing, and that the dad, that's her brother, and that the dad and the Men's Association guys are looking for him. So mom's going to go try to find him, and she ends up at the Men's Association building, and she finds this basement of bodies that are under sheets, and one of them is her actual daughter, who's still alive, which was a big surprise to me. I thought for sure she was dead.
Yes.
So, but apparently at some point the main guy, that Richard, whatever his name is, had said that they had to replace her too soon, and so she wasn't fixed. She wasn't done yet. So I guess they kept the original so that they could use her to program the other girl better, like to make her better. Anyway, the point is, for whatever reason, they haven't killed her yet. So Barbara Eden's trying to save her, but the Men's Association people corner the two of them, and it looks like they're doomed, at which point David, the brother/son, comes crashing through the window on his motorcycle. That's a really, really nice scene. And then throws this motorcycle as he jumps off of it, and it bursts into flames. Grabs his mom and his sister, runs out. The guys somehow don't manage to get out right behind them, and they get blown up because of all these fluids. Oh, meanwhile, Barbara Eden has found that all the other bodies under the sheets are these weird creatures that are not quite formed humans yet. They're kind of like embryo, like adult-sized embryo-looking things. And so those guys do escape. So somehow those guys escape, but not the men from the men's association, because those guys are coming after them in the car.
They must run like...
or they're fireproof. They break easily, but they're fireproof. I don't know. Anyway, but then that's it, and then they leave. So once she gets to the men's association basement, that scene until the end of the movie, that's about 5 minutes at the most. And it really felt to me like that could have gone a lot longer. Like some of this other stuff could have been cut, but that could have gone a lot longer. It was very, I'm not going to say anticlimactic, because it's not anticlimactic.
Pretty
but
good, though. That's
fast.
actually a decent wrap-up of the entire film, and I think you did that in about 3 minutes. I mean, that was great. That was yeah. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we must touch on here. I mean, I think really the thing to watch for is, I think I do encourage people to watch this, because I think there's an opportunity to retell this story in an interesting way.
I think so. I think it's there. I think there's a way of doing it. It's just, it's sort of there. But I mean, you watch this also because of Dick Butkus and James Coco. Because really, it's a slice of time for sure.
Yes. Well, like I said, Julia and I met the year this movie came out. So all these clothes are the clothes that we wore. In fact, I think it would be wise for Julia at least to post a picture of herself.
Well, I'm sorry. Why am I the only one?
Because you had the teased hair. You had the
I didn't have quite the hair. No, I didn't have the hair she had. That was totally different.
Actually, if I recall, you had sort of Sheena Easton hair.
Yeah, I had a short haircut in my freshman year of high school, and about when I met you sophomore year. So
I think I had a mullet at this time.
Yeah, when I met you, I had the short hair, and then I grew out my hair, but I never teased my hair. If I teased my hair, I would look like a witch, because I have very curly hair, so it's like super, like if I tease it, it's way bigger than this girl's even was. But
I think we should all try to find photographs of ourselves in 1987 and post them.
I already have posted mine on Facebook, so I'll just share it to the Castle of Horror podcast.
That's a wonderful idea. But to me, you can. My mind kept snapping back and forth between the horror implications of it, which Adam said you really have, as Adam said, you have to bring yourself. You kind of have to bring those ideas to this movie, because the movie's not really playing with them very much. But in the meantime, you can just look at like the state of movie of the week in 1987. The way it was being filmed, what kind of acting was expected, what kind of ridiculous fashions are being worn. So that can be really, really cool too. In fact, I should let that be my final thought, because the rest I'll just post the film on the Facebook page, and you should watch it. Adam, what are your final thoughts that you would share?
Well, as much as I thought this was kind of the fluffy white sort of topping on a horror show dessert, that a tasty horror show dessert that sort of is the Stepford franchise. I thought this was possibly the thinnest one. It actually had its strange 80s charm, and it was good to see, again, Barbara Eden sort of doing something on Richard Anderson. And I'm going to keep saying James Coco, because, again, I was really surprised he was in
James
this.
Coco, who teaches, I guess, home ec.
Yeah.
And let me, I hope you don't mind my interrupting, but
no.
The existence of home ec, which I don't think exists anymore.
Well, they call it something different.
If any of our listeners are like young, like in high
sciences
school,
or something.
No, our daughter took a class. Remember that she took some kind of like life skills or whatever. What do they call it? Like text?
Okay.
I don't know. Whatever they call it.
Like life
something.
preparation.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, you had a class where they taught you to cook, and they taught you to like do a checking.
So we learned how to sew. Actually, interesting that you should mention that, because this week is the 30th anniversary of the Challenger explosion. And
Wow.
I met Jason at the high school, at Clear Lake High School, which is where I went to school. That's my house. My parents' house is 5 minutes from Johnson Space Center. So we went to school with all the astronauts, with the astronauts' kids and the kids of all the engineers and all those people from NASA. And so one of my classmates' dads was actually pilot of that shuttle. So it was very deeply, like powerfully difficult, whatever the word is, experience for our community. And I always think of that when I think of home ec, because I was in home ec class when I heard about it, because when the explosion happened, we were in my home ec class, and they like brought in the TV and we watched it and everything. But it's interesting that's my association with home ec is this horrible tragedy. But I do also have one other association with home ec, which is a really hideous felt blue plaid shirt that I made. So that's the other one.
I think everybody has one of those terrible shirts that they made.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sorry, Adam. You were in the middle of giving your final thoughts.
Well, I think that even though it's not amazing, it is interesting to sort of see what they did with it, and it's definitely pure movie of the week fare. But we really don't have movie of the week fare right now, so it's definitely a slice of time. And I think it's worth seeing, even though I've sort of railed against it throughout most of this, just because I think some of the finer points, if you can call them that, about this kind of story could have been brought out more, and still trading on the themes that kind of made the first one something that we're still talking about, despite the fact that it was a movie of the week and you probably couldn't get by with most of it. It didn't have a theatrical release, and so it was under different standards and practices. I still think it's probably worth seeing, and particularly if if you grew up in the 80s and you want sort of an unvarnished, self-aware sort of look back to that in a way that's sort of non-Terminator related, because I know, most of us will look back at the Terminator and kind of go, oh, Club Noir, or Tech Noir, and we go, oh, it's the 80s. But this is it's like a much deeper, or you go to Lost Boys, which actually was, outfitted to really stand up and really be a slice of 80s that was in Joel Schumacher's mind, and I think plays terrifically.
Yes.
But
yeah.
This not as much, but I think it's worth seeing. And I think it could be remade. I think, as someone said earlier, it could be remade today and be really one hell of a movie, I think, conceptually. I don't know whether you would concentrate on the kids or what you would do, but I think that, it could stand a remake. And if there isn't one in the works, I'm hopefully there'll be one soon, and I expect 10%.
I really honestly think, Adam, that the way to do a good remake of this is to think of it in terms of, as we talked about, these various movements, political movements that try to look back at the culture war, essentially. The notion that people are losing the culture war, that the languages are changing, that people lack respect, and yada, yada, yada. All that stuff that creates memes on our Facebook pages. And so the horror of this film would be to say, so if you gave those guys who are concerned about all of that the power to kill people, to remake the world as they want to, would they do it, and what would the world look like? And I think that's a really, really interesting. I think it's probably more interesting now than it was in 1987, possibly, because the culture wars have gone way farther now than they had at the time.
Well, and like I said last week, and I feel the same way about this movie, I guess that's my final thoughts, is that I think that these men are not really they're not really doing what they would do in a natural just sort of state of things. Like if they had the choice, do whatever you want, I don't think replacing their family with robots is what they would come up with. But it's that these guys that are at the top, Diz in the last movie, and then this guy Richard, they are, have decided this is what we want our community to look like, and they brainwash. I mean, you hear how hard they push just in that one conversation about how things are perfect here and this is how we're going to do it. I mean, if he's brainwashing these people and, like I said, maybe even threatening them, saying, well, if you choose not to do this, then unfortunately you can't be allowed to leave, that could be that's part of it, because I just don't believe that given their druthers, all of these people would decide to replace all their family with robots, because how boring is that? I mean, it just seems like it's so boring to me. So I think that it's got to be there's got to be more to it.
I do not think in this film that these guys are being. I don't think they're being manipulated. I don't think they're being tricked or the way that I got that in the first movie. In this one, I really get the idea that they just hate the fact that these kids talk back, and they really, really want.
Yeah, but that guy seemed pretty choked up by the fact that his kid was getting grabbed up on the.
No, I agree, but I was not convinced by the notion that I'm thinking of the father of Lois. You really do get the
impression. That guy
guy
seemed like he was totally on board with the whole thing.
You can't stand the notion that these girls are like, that the girls sneak out and the boys, which again, it's 1987. That means this guy most likely was in high school in 1967. You know, which there's plenty of libertinism.
No, why would he be in high school? No, he would have been in 1960 maybe.
Well, maybe, but I mean, my parents. I was.
Yeah, but your mom was 20 when you were born, but a lot of these folks would have been older.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's true. But my point is, it's not like they didn't have casual sex in the 50s either. You know, it's.
Yeah.
Because the notion.
Yeah, but the whole idea of parents getting older is that they forget what it was like to be a teenager.
But like Adam was talking about, Lawrence Welk. This desire to go back to Lawrence Welk is a desire to go back to an imaginary world.
Yeah.
I mean, it was never really there, and it's I mean, that's what. Look, I spend a lot of time in nostalgia land, watching Gidget movies and all this stuff, presenting a version of the 50s. But it's not the real 50s. It's the real 50s was grimy and rough.
You don't know what the real 50s was because you went there.
Yeah, no, but you can get a pretty good idea by looking at documents and so forth, and it's just a lot uglier than the way the 50s are presented, except for some works which are quite grimy, and that gives you sort of a clue, right? But
it's American Graffiti, man.
Yeah, American Graffiti. Actually, a lot of the noirs of the 50s are kind of grungy and cynical and violent. Think of like Kiss Me Deadly, where Cloris Leachman is tortured to death, and stuff like that, where that angle of the world isn't really contemplated by Lawrence Welk. I keep saying Lawrence Welk, and I keep wondering, if any of our listeners, if you're listening in Britain, you may not even know who Lawrence Welk is.
Or if you're under 40.
And if you're under 40, you may be like, why do they keep mentioning this Lawrence Welk? What the hell?
Actually, you know what? Let me tell you who Lawrence Welk is. Lawrence Welk is who the SNL sketch with Kristen Wiig, where she has the weird little tiny hands, that's what that's based on.
Wow.
That's true. That's totally true. Those are Lawrence Welk's, and it's so bizarre that they would do that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think what it must be that Will Ferrell has some sort of strange mat on for Lawrence Welk, because he really seems to dig doing those things. Okay, that's quite enough. Probably that's more time than anybody's spent talking about the Stepford Children probably since
ever
it came out.
Yeah, I think even when they were writing the script, they talked about it less.
Let's get endorsements if you have any. Let's go Julia, Adam, and then I'll go Julia. Do you have any endorsements for us?
I have a lukewarm endorsement this week. It's more of a mild appreciation. We were big fans of the X-Files back in the day. And as I told my BFF, Jennifer, watching the new X-Files on Sunday, we didn't watch it yet, the one from last night yet, but the one from Sunday, it's kind of like going to a high school reunion where it's really nice to see your old friends, but the connection's not really there anymore, and they all look different and maybe not as good as you remember. And, it's just kind of, that the conversations aren't going to be super deep. So it's like that. It was fun to see our old friends again and to kind of get into that world, but it just felt like far removed. It's like, okay, this is not how it felt when we went.
You're saying it feels like an imitation X-Files. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Well, not even just like an imitation X-Files, but just like I said, like I'm saying, it's like you're seeing old friends that you haven't seen in a long time, but you're not at that comfortable place yet where you pick up where you left off. You kind of at the, oh, so what have you been up to? What's going on? Do you have kids? That whole thing. So that's kind of how I felt about it.
It's so funny that this is an X-Files miniseries.
Yeah.
Actually. So, Adam, did you have anything that you wanted to endorse?
Yeah, actually, we happened to catch here at our house an episode of Sherlock. I guess.
Oh, we love Sherlock.
Yeah, there's a new one, which were new for us anyway. One of the newer ones. We're actually, not to give a lot away, but there's a certain point where actually in essence, it takes place in the 1800s. and it was just very interesting to sort of see, modern day Holmes and Watson, actually modern day cast, transposed basically to Gaslight. Yeah, and it was really, really interesting, and it was good to see kind of everybody back, and it actually was a very interesting story, and we really liked it. So yeah, I'm endorsing that this week.
Yeah, we loved that one too.
Well, my only endorsement actually was the X-Files. So Julia took.
So, but do you have a more favorable?
Maybe you liked it.
Actually, I did. I haven't seen the second episode, but I'm aware that it's a 6-episode miniseries, and that they're going to try to have a different tone for each episode. So I'm excited about seeing the biological monster episodes that they're going to have. And
yeah, that was the difference. Jason and I always split on which ones we liked. I always liked the story arc, and he always liked the standalone monster episodes.
And it was such an important thing to us in our youth. I mean, when we were in law school, our close friends watched it. When we were young marrieds, everybody would, all the young couples would get together and cook dinner and watch the X-Files. And so the X-Files is this thing that's really deeply personal to me. So it is cool to see it back. I think the single coolest thing to me about the new X-Files is that the metadata that comes through on the Dish Network Hopper system, the metadata says this is Season 10, Episode 1, which I think is hilarious.
And the opening credits is the same one.
And the opening credits are literally the same opening credits. They didn't even change out the faces of the characters.
Or improve the quality of the picture.
or improve it. They're the same cheesy opening credits that they were however the hell long ago Season 1 of the X-Files was. That is so strange. And yes, Adam, you totally need to see this if you haven't seen it yet.
No, it's sitting on my TiVo. I haven't seen it yet. I do have one question.
Seeing that cheesy video, the video from the opening credits will totally just make you laugh. It's so wonderfully I don't even know how to describe it. There's something.
It's innocent.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the new X-Files. So
I have one question for Julia now. After all this is said and done, that is, do you feel like a lucky girl?
I'm a very lucky girl. Very lucky girl.
Exactly.
She's been saying that for years, I have to say, actually. So
and rightfully so.
Yes.
You're both very lucky.
All right. Have a fantastic evening. Thank you guys so much for being on and for talking about the Stepford Children. And
thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And we will be back next week, I believe, with, if we can find a copy of it, it'll be The Stepford Husbands, or we'll go straight to 2004. We haven't decided yet. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Good night, John.
You too. Bye.